Got it. Okay, so my presentation is to dream the impossible dream. Brief history of the abuse. Just trying to minimize that. Thank you. My mother tried to abort me before I was born. And in therapy in 2006, it was established that I might have held a memory of that trauma. I was abused by my mother and stepfather, sexual abuse, beatings, verbal abuse, embarrassed and shamed in public, neglect and rejected, hated and not wanted, and disrespected. We were placed in and out of foster homes and spent a number of times in St. Gabriel's Children's Home whenever our mother was admitted to the Ngashini Hospital in Zimbabwe for shock treatment and psychiatric treatment. We were abused by others, my grandmother, grandfather, male house servant. Well, I should say. A young shop owner, friend, the mole abuser. All of these I've talked about in my book, which hopefully will be finished soon. I had 2 abusive husbands. I was traumatized in therapy as a result of transference and counter-transference. And I became suicidal and started to self-injure as a result of the emotional turmoil that I experienced over that time. There were other close family members over the years and other negative traumatic experiences in childhood and adulthood, such as when our 11-day-old baby brother died. That was very traumatic. There was also a gun incident where one of my mother's boyfriends, very drunk, arrived one night and wanted to kill my mother, and they was shouting and screaming, and my mother and her sister and my sister and I were shoved from one room to the next to try and avoid this man. And in the end, my mother shoved me out the bathroom window and told me to run to the neighbors. I was so frightened, and that's all I remember of that incident. But there were many incidents like that. The results of abuse: lack of self-worth and self-confidence and belief in myself and my place of being and belonging in the world, self-loathing, self-injury, feeling invisible, and working with child abuse survivors. The invisibility spell, as I call it, seemed to be quite prevalent. I discovered that many are savers and hoarders of something or other, be it recording their existence by journaling or saving many photographs or stuff. And I truly believe that this is because they want someone to know one day that after they are gone, I was here, see me, know me, understand me, remember me. I also suffered from depression, deep sadness, and triggered anger. And this, I think, comes from different inner child levels, conflicting emotions, different ages. This needs to be considered. This would require a whole other level of understanding by family, friends, colleagues, therapists, etc. Also struggle with what's the use syndrome. That it seems to me that no matter how hard I try, I can never quite get there. I can never quite be. And I think I'm particularly struggling with that now with the COVID, and seem to have been disconnected in my future orientation. It's like, what's going to happen now? But anyway, okay. I'm overprotective, and this is a huge problem. I couldn't save my little sister from her suffering when I was a child. And today, if someone threatens anyone or anything I love, my inner adolescent subpersonality, Patricia, surfaces. She is my most voiceless subpersonality holding the trapped anger. I struggle with relationships. And the question is, who am I in the relationship with the other? What needs are being met in the relationship? When things go wrong in a relationship, what part of me is hurt by it? What part of me has lost what was? How does that part of me perceive and react to the loss? For me, the experience such as loss, I experience such loss as a death. I grieve. Nobody else can see or feel what I see or feel. So this is not something that you can fix for me. Only I can help myself by constantly being aware of what is going on in every single situation on the different levels of my personality. I have to remember to count to 10, consider what could go wrong if I dare to speak out about something I don't agree with in a relationship. I think that learning to do this is where emotional intelligence comes in. So it is my constant work and my burden to bear and overcome in order to transcend my past. But at what cost? Surely for healing, it is also vitally important to allow each subpersonality part of myself to have the voice they could never have when they got stuck inside as a result of the abuse trauma that they suffered. So I also struggle with withdrawal, isolation, abject loneliness. There's a reason why I'm sharing this with you. Psychosomatic pain and illness, gout, arthritis, mental illness, chronic fatigue syndrome. Get a bit lost. Dissociation and dissociative identity disorder is one of my problems, where the personality is divided, as I mentioned before. I have inner children, and if we have time at the end, I could read a poem I wrote about that, but I could actually just send it to anybody who's interested afterwards. And it's the loss, the never-ending losses and the grieving sadness. Nothing and no one ever seems to be permanent, especially in relationships. And even my beloved dogs, my most loving friends, eventually die. And the religious trauma syndrome is something that I struggle with as a result of what happened in therapy, where my therapist did her best to force her religious values on me. And the list goes on. So there's just a picture of my journals. Some of them, oh my goodness, there's so many. As a result of the invisibility spell, I truly fear dying. I'm certain that when I die, my family will throw away all my journals, poetry books, stories, and records. Let my blog close because I'm no longer there to pay and to. This is a genuine fear I have. If I ever win the lottery, I will pay someone to type it all out for me and put it onto discs, which I would distribute to more than one person to make sure nothing that is remaining of me in this world will ever be lost forever, in order to make sure I won't be forgotten, thrown away with all the memories held in my copious writings. Perhaps it can all be donated to a university which might find it interesting to study my life and be able to help others through all that I've shared. I just want to read a poem to you that I wrote in March 2009. You say that I must change my script from who I've always been. Do you think that I can wave a wand and deny the past I've seen? I chose the way I am today when I was just a child, in the twisted hands of those whose touch poisoned and defiled. I cannot see the day, for the darkness still blocks out so much light. It seems no matter how hard I try, I cannot win this fight. The way to change fills me with dread because I cannot grasp its truth, for I have always been the one I am right now since as early as my youth. There's so much fear still locked inside that I shudder to face this life. Each day a bitter struggle filled with inner turmoil and strife, where I see the sun is shining and I see the sky is blue, but I cannot find the sun's warm rays, or enjoy the sky's lovely hue. It's like I'm on another plane raised just above the land. I see the world as it should be, but I can't reach it with my hand. I feel distant to each one around, and though I think they can hear me speak, it's as though they do not understand, and it leaves me feeling bleak. So in this dark and sullen place, how can I ever change? What is change from where I am? The world seems sad, so sad and strange. Where do I belong? Where am I safe? Who can I trust at all? Is there just one who will reach in right now and hear my garbled call? Someone who will understand and take me in their heart and gently show me why or how and guide me to the start. Someone who will never give up like all the rest, no matter how hard the task. Please send them, Lord. Please send them now. For this I humbly ask. So in February 2009, I signed up to study logotherapy. A month later, around about when I wrote this poem, I had my first workshop at UNISA. I remember how petrified I was. Who was I ever to be seen at a university? How would I ever fit in? Mother's voice. You're too stupid. You'll never amount to anything. You'll never fit in. I cried at every workshop for the first year or more. The trainers and students just let me be. They seemed to accept me just as I was. It was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. I started to believe I belonged. I started to believe that I fitted in. I began to thrive. My poetic prayer, written a month before, was answered, especially in the form of Turia Chantal. God sent me the one which I had prayed for. It took someone like Turia to show my very well established and highly destructive self-belief system that I could be wrong. Maybe there is another level of being in relationships with another person that is safe and non-threatening, that they won't go away no matter how bad I have been indoctrinated to believe that I am. Turia, all on her own, with a rare few coming close to teach me the same thing that I have longed for and dreamed of being, dreamed of being unconditionally loved and accepted in, isn't only in another place for another time, but also exists as a possibility, a reality right here in the world, that trusting is possible, and that even without my own mother's love, it is possible that I am still worthy to receive love from this world. And the one thing I am most grateful for is that Turia has always kept a safe boundary between herself and I, and knows exactly how to protect me from the dreaded transference from ever happening again. Even when on rare occasions things seem to go wrong in my relationship with her.
Sorry, Pan, somehow I muted you. Will you just unmute again, please?
Okay. Okay. And the one thing I'm most grateful for is that Turia has always kept a safe boundary between herself and I, and knows exactly how to protect me from the dreaded transference from ever happening again. Even when on rare occasions things seem to go wrong in my relationship with her, she has surprised me by still being authentically there, never wavering, steadfast and true. I could not even push Turia away. She has taught me that trust is possible, and that her relationship with me is true. Only a few others have ever come close to the trust that I hold for Turia. This has taught me to continue to take chances on relationships, letting people in, even if it only lasts for a while. I must never give up on seeking out this kind of truth and healing for myself. The world is not what happened to me. There is so much beauty, goodness, and love still to be found here, and I have to keep convincing and reminding myself that it is true. Logotherapy and Turia showed me that I am a somebody in this world who is worthy of existing here. I have come to know that Turia believes in me 100%, and she won't give up on believing in me, even when I can't believe in myself, which is most times. Something meaningful draws us out of ourselves. It enlarges our vision, enriches us, and causes us to grow, to become bigger and better than we are. Frankl quoted Goethe as saying, If we take a man as he is, we make him worse. If we take him as he ought to be, we help him to become it. And just quickly, a memory popped up the other day that I thought I'd include. 12 years ago, I wrote, "Tonight I go to my first public speaking session with a lady I met at my logotherapy workshop recently. She offered to teach me how on earth to be brave when talking in public. I'm on my way to my dream of becoming a motivational speaker. Hey, I have to start somewhere. If my dream is ever to come true, life is good." You can hear there that I was feeling positive, like I could feel the change was happening. The little stone there is a stone she gave me to hold in my hand when I was presenting so that I could stay grounded. So I really appreciated that. Her name was Annie. Achievements before logotherapy found me. I was a professional nurse, 4 children. I tried to be the best mother I possibly could. I wrote lots and lots of poetry, over 1,000 poems. I wrote a lot of children's stories. I had a chance to present on garnishing and herbs to local schools and women's organizations. I had 2 times was called 2 times to be on a radio program with my son about him as his Asperger's syndrome. And I think when I look back, those people at the radio station were very friendly. The people I presented to, I felt comfortable with. So those were, when I look back now, I can clearly see how life was gently preparing me for what I am doing today. Gardening is something that I do. I love vegetable and herb gardening. I believe I'm a good neighbor. I try very hard to be. I have a loving heart. I started my therapy journey in 2006, and that took a lot of courage. I learned computer at about the age of 45, never even knew how to switch one on before then. And I've been told that I'm very creative and talented, and I think that's helped to pull me through also, through life. So achievements after logotherapy found me. 2011, I passed my, I'm just switching off my phone that keeps going off. In 2011, I passed my logotherapy advanced course. 2012, presented in Israel. 2013, 12 to 13, I changed my diet and lost 52 kgs. As a result, I stopped all chronic medications and never been healthier. 2013, I presented in Dallas, Texas. 2015, I became a double diplomat, I then passed my logotherapy clinical and educator administrator courses. 2015, I started my blog. That was very brave. Took a lot of courage for me because I was so afraid of exposing myself, feeling like such a fool in the world as it is. To share my weaknesses and that with people was not an easy decision to make, but I'm so glad I have. In 2020, I became a sacred dying doula. I counsel many people specializing in adult survivors of child abuse, logotherapy dream interpretation, and logotherapy interpretation of daydream worlds. And I have other counseling skills. I've never had much confidence in the area. This is just people that come to me. I've never been brave enough to ask for payment for the things I do, for the counseling. But it's just a dream come true for me. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to do it. And believe me when I say that before my 50s, I had no idea that I could do any of this stuff. I honestly had no clue that I was this capable, or that I had any real intelligence at all, or could be this brave. So it is something I'm extremely grateful for. Since logotherapy, I've created a few presentations, as you can see, then they've actually been used on the courses. Again, something I'm extremely grateful for. I think I'm just losing my place a bit. Okay, so I have to say but, because even with all those achievements, I still struggle greatly. Rejection, feeling rejected is one of my biggest problems. So if someone I've trusted or felt close to is too quiet for a while or changes their pattern of connection with me, I immediately start to believe that I have upset them or they've stopped loving me or believing in me. You won't believe the stories I can make up in my head and the pain that I go through, especially when patterns of connection change. I know immediately that I've blown it, that nothing will ever be the same again, and the grieving begins, and it can continue for months. And again, I need to work out what part of me was in that relationship with that person. What part of me is grieving the loss that once was? Who am I who am I in my relationship with you? The big question: are you providing a nurturing role or a supportive role? Do you make me feel brave? Are you my rescuer? Is it Patty, my younger inner child, who you are holding in your care? Is it Patricia, who you are acknowledging? And where does my adult part fit into it all? So many questions, so complicated, so much turmoil has to be unraveled and dealt with. Something only I can work on and get right for myself. Now, I also struggle with triggers. What I need to take into consideration here is what part of me is being triggered and why. I can be very outspoken. If my adolescent subpersonality Patricia is triggered, I can feel deeply disturbed and angry. That's when I become outspoken. If my little girl Patty is triggered, I feel victimized and cry a lot and need plenty of reassurance. At her emotional level to stop the deep sadness and crying. There's also the powerful script messages. You're useless. You'll never amount to anything. No one will ever love you, etc. I struggle with dissociation, depression, sadness. Sometimes I'll repeat myself. I'm sorry about that. Loneliness is a big problem for me. Feeling and being stuck, intrusive thoughts and physical feelings that can torture me. Being overprotective again. Extreme trust issues, addiction needs unfulfilled. And when I say addiction, it fits into the self-injury, drinking, which I did a lot of when I was in my 20s. I believe I was an alcoholic then. I was married to an abuser at the time. And I stopped when I fell pregnant with my first child and promised God I'll never drink again as long as he was safe. And I kept to that promise. And overeating was another addiction I struggled with. And I believe all of these, including other struggles, what other people struggle with, such as those who turn to drugs, cutting or relieving of intense or torturous feelings of sexual arousal, etc., stem from the same kind of desperate, exploding pressure cooker emotions that need to be dealt with, gratified, punished, or relieved. So what keeps me going and gives my life meaning? My children, grandchildren, and siblings, my dogs, my logotherapy world, and working with our students, the people who stood by me. Gratitude. Gratitude is huge for me. I often feel overwhelmed with gratitude when thinking of the impact that someone really special has had on my life, or even just things that happen in my life that show me that I'm not alone, for instance, or over something that I see as a sign from heaven, a little miracle, such as one day I bent down to pull something out of the garden, and a whole lot of little finches flew over the wall into the lemon tree, and one actually landed on my back. To me, that was the most incredible feeling and something that I will always remember. It was a moment in time. Taking responsibility is important for or towards all of those that I've mentioned above and more. Memories of my mountaintop experience with Tyria and a few of the new friends that I met in Israel. My unfinished books and poetry, my belief in my purpose and life task. I trust that I really am here for an important reason. Believing that heaven is with me, and that if I reached out with my hand, I could touch it through the veil. And therefore, that and the heaven I believe in is worth waiting for, and that heaven is also waiting lovingly for me. I believe that whatever love I could not find here in this world, I will find in heaven some beautiful day. So at least I've got some hope. So never to find love in this world, romantic relationships. Okay. Could I ever really trust romantic love again? I have held on to my Cinderella dreams ever since I was a little girl, that someday Prince Charming would come and rescue me and love me and keep me safe. I waited for my father to come and rescue me all through the years, but he couldn't. He's just a little man, and my mother was so intimidating and so powerful. She always got her own way and would destroy anyone who tried to stop her. So now I wait patiently to be with my Father in heaven. I trust that he is waiting lovingly and longingly for me also. Dissociative identity disorder. What part of me would be in love with a man? What part of me would be in the relationship? What level of need would be fulfilled or punishment added? The reason I'm sharing this with you is that I want to give myself a voice. It's the first time I've spoken about this, that one of my greatest sadnesses is that I will never be able to be loved in the way that I should have as a child, but in the way I should be as a woman. And so this is a tremendous sadness for me. Body image. There are men, I used to be a fat woman, and there are men that would love a fuller bodied woman. I know that. But what man could love a woman that's got so much baggy, ugly skin that I've got now? The skin just hangs, and it's really disgusting. What man could love that? And I did try once, out of desperation, to have to raise the money to have it removed, at least my stomach portion. But we couldn't raise the money. I didn't even get a response to that plea. So it's just something that I have to live with. And of course, there's my baggage. There's the emotional baggage. And my now adult son, diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, lives with me, and who I will stand by for as long as he needs me. So for me, I just know that my opportunities for love and to be in a romantic relationship are gone. And so that's very hard for me. You may have heard the quote by Lisa Palmer, "Angry is just sad's bodyguard." My mother was always angry, frighteningly angry. To me as a little girl, my mother could, in an instant, change into what looked and sounded like an attacking, growling monster. Her anger attacks were so unpredictable, so vicious and so frequent that I chose to work with all my power to never end up like her. My little sister and I made a promise to each other many years ago that we'd never grow up to be like our mother. Not even my therapist could get me to act out my trapped anger. She couldn't get me to beat a pillow with my abuser's faces on, for instance. I just couldn't go there. Anger is when I have drunk myself into a stupor in my 20s, or self-injured in my childhood, as well as during that therapy time. Anger was when I used to stuff myself with food and didn't care about my health. Anger is when I've, on rare occasions, allowed my protective adolescent self, Patricia, to surface, and I've allowed her voice. Something I cannot allow anymore, because I always end up with loss, which Patricia is most sensitive to. Almost nobody understands Patricia. Mother silenced her. Other abusers silenced her. My reactions are the reactions of those she upsets with her voice has also silenced her. And in order for me to retain some semblance of peace in this world, even I have learned to silence Patricia. I think that it's only me and heaven who can ever truly understand Patricia. I love her, but for the sake of peace and sanity, she must remain separate and invisible. And so because I have to work so hard not to allow my deep anger to surface, because that is my choice since the promise my little sister and I made many years ago, I am stuck instead with the deepest sadness. So my question to you all as I near the end of this presentation is, just because I have never been able to rid myself of sadness, does that make me any less victorious over my suffering than I continuously work and strive to be? Those who knew me as the victim of my cruel past up until logotherapy found me in my 50s say they can hardly believe I'm the same person after all the changes for good that have happened in my life since the day I entered my logotherapy world. So even though I have always struggled with deep sadness and even some really deep-seated fears, can it rather be said of me one day when I eventually leave this world? And can it be written on my gravestone? Panayiota was a woman of love, integrity, and courage, who was indeed victorious over her suffering. She was not invisible, and she will always be remembered as someone who made a difference for good in this world. And I'd like to just finish off by reading a poem, Sadness. Sadness wants to be who I am, whether I like it or not. Surely this was not meant to be my eternal lot. It will not leave me. It will not let go. It is what it is. It is just so. All through the years, sadness has chosen to stay with its hunchbacked stance and its destroying way. Their sadness just sits inside of me, staring down forlornly at the wet, muddy sea. And the tears from my soul keep spilling down, and the lines of my face have engraved a sad frown. And I'm dying, you know, a bit more each day, because sadness won't let me live, and it won't let me play. How dare sadness have such a hold on my heart? How dare sadness choose to tear me apart? How dare sadness rule who I am all my life, twisting my soul, causing nothing but strife? How dare grief overshadow my days and my nights? What about my feelings? What about my rights? But sadness cares nothing for who I should be. It just won't let go its strangling grip on me. And so I am tortured each and every sad day where I'm so lost I can't find my way. Sadness has trapped me for too long in this miserable dark world where no one can see I'm sorely embattled. But I must not allow its destructive treachery. I must rise against it to reclaim life's victory. And if I die before I succeed, please say to the world this for me. She did all she could to be free. She never gave up her healing quest. She always worked hard to become her best. She succeeded in bringing healing to the sad world out there with all of her loving and all of her care. And I thank you for that. I'm finished.
Yeah, I'm sure we are all struck to the core of our beings, Pan, and you brought home a very great truth to me, one that I did experience in my helplessness in the face of the sufferings of the Holocaust survivors whom I had interviewed, and on whose stories I captured in my doctorate and the book, Life's Meaning in the Face of Suffering. This was brought home to my heart. You know, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I very soon realized there was no way that I and anybody else could do the kind of therapy that will bring such a sufferer to total healing. It was impossible. And I was confronted with this sadness that I couldn't bring about that total healing or help the person to come totally free of the deep wounds that they keep on suffering. And that, like you said, that triggered so easily and came to the surface, no matter the the great and meaningful lives they achieved, it was deep down inside them. And you know, Frankel, you couldn't quickly approach him, not from behind. And I mean, he succeeded more than anybody else to declare victory over that terrible suffering. And the suffering that was not only of those in the Holocaust, but people like yourself that have been made victims of a cruelty that is unimaginably evil. And there's no way that we can have total triumph over evil. Not total. You know, I was thinking, Frankel spoke about finding suffering, meaning in suffering, because of the suffering. Well, this is total healing, of course. And this is what we most often do in doing logotherapy. But there's also finding meaning in suffering despite suffering. And that despite remains in the life that have been, in the lives of those who've been so deeply wounded like yourself. So what was my conclusion and the truth that you again so rivetingly and poignantly highlighted for us tonight? And that is, you know, when you said you felt that heaven was with you and that heaven was waiting for you, I realized, you know, I had a vision once of the gas chambers and the ovens that burnt the body to ashes. And I saw out of those ashes the spirits of those sufferers descending to paradise, to a place of waiting. And what was brought home to me was, and this was my comfort in the face of my own helplessness, to really bring such sufferers to total victory and to freedom. And it was this: there is a vengeance waiting. And there's no way that these sufferers that I have, the Holocaust survivors that I work with, or with you, Pan, there's no way that the wounds of this suffering and your struggle with it can, in this world, totally be taken away. It asks for the transcendent taking vengeance himself. And we know that those of us who are believers, scripture says, vengeance is mine. It's something beyond our ability. And that's why you're so trapped with Patricia, your aggressive part, because if she should release herself, I mean, how can she take vengeance? There's no way. Evil can never be dealt with in terms of what it deserves. We cannot express that kind of anger. It would destroy us. And therefore, we have to contain that anger. And you know, there is a burning anger, even in me. A burning anger at the evil that's perpetrated in this world. And that anger is based on a resolute faith that evil will be dealt with. And I was so convinced that these Holocaust survivors, one of them, a 92-year-old woman who died, her name is Dina Benedict, that she had achieved such greatness in her life, but she could never overcome her wounds. And you know, she was actually, in a sense, because of that, like you are, Pan, sometimes too outspoken, sometimes too withdrawn, sometimes even hurtful in her relationships with other people. She was struggling all her life long. And you know what? I want to tell you that you have achieved a victory that those of us who haven't suffered like you have can never even think to achieve. Okay, it's a victory that awaits a reward that none of us will receive that haven't gone through the depths of despair and through the dark valleys of evil like you have. And that is the vengeance that will be exercised, because in that vengeance will be a restoration, a restitution, a comfort we cannot even conceive of. So I thank you once again for blessing me. I mean, that's why I couldn't let go of you, Pan. I couldn't let go of you no, I never even wanted to try, never, ever wanted to try, because I needed to hold on to you. I needed to hold on to this firm belief in who you really are. So, and that person who you really am, that you really are, shone forth even before your journey into logotherapy. And so, my dear, you have reached the unreachable star. Thank you.
Thank you, Teria.